Dreaming of a Geekish podcast. Hey, dream come true. I'm Derek. That's Beano over there, looking flabbergasted.
I don't know what to think right now.
Speaking of flabbergasted, put a pin in that one. Fun words later on.
Yeah, hey.
But anyway,
okay.
we're here today to, get geekish about some certain things. We talk about pop culture, we get nostalgic, and today we're going the pop culture route with redemption arcs. Now, don't ask Beano what a redemption arc is, because he got confused.
You could ask me now. A redemption arc is very simply where a character in a series does some bad things, and then later on in the series or fandom, they do something else to kind of redeem themselves and go back in the good graces and kind of make up for the bad things they did before.
Mm-hmm. So
for some reason, when Derek brought this up to me, my brain was not clicking, and that was not making sense to me. So it's kind of a weird inside joke, but it's probably going to come up a few times, so I get made fun of for it.
Yeah, that's all right. So we'll get through some of the big ones here, and we'll kind of discuss and see do they deserve the redemption arc? Because I mean, sometimes when we're watching stuff, sometimes it seems forced. One I'm going to throw out there that you're not going to be able to weigh in on because you never finished the show is Walter White from Breaking Bad. Now, in that show, he
did he ever stop being a horrible person and cheating on his wife and treating his children horribly?
Yeah, I mean, like at the very end, he had kind of that redemption arc of sacrificing himself and helping out Jesse. If you haven't seen the show, spoiler alert, sorry, it is, how old is this show now? Is it pushing like 10 years old?
At least, isn't it?
Oh, man, I feel old. Anywho, so he kind of did redeem himself. Did he deserve it? I don't think so.
To me, I feel like the redemption arcs that are the most hard-hitting are the ones where their characters do something bad, and they don't just make up for their mistakes, they make up for something altruistic and much bigger than them. Mm-hmm. Like, even your explanation of Walter right there, again, I don't know the details because I didn't see it all, but the redemption arc is coming from he's decides to sacrifice himself to save her for the horrible position he put her in.
Well, no, so we got to look at so you look at the show, right? You look at the show, he started off as a guy that got dealt some bad cards, right? He got some bad luck. And then he started making some horrible decisions going on and treating people like, garbage and everything like that. And then when, his buddy Jesse came in and started cooking with him, he started treating Jesse like crap. And he was like, oh, yeah, blah, blah, blah. And he basically got Jesse kidnapped. So then he had to go rescue him towards the end there, because it's a whole thing. But he did redeem himself, and it was a satisfying end, but I'm not sure if it's like, oh, he's a good guy. Like you take the opposite, you kind of look at Loki, right? Mm-hmm. Comics aside, we'll look at the Marvel universe, the cinematic
universe, just to keep it brief.
Yeah. We'll look at the cinematic universe. He's always out for himself, but he does the redeeming things of where he actually turns around and helps out, and he kind of had, I don't know, like, I know some people feel like his redemption arc going up against Thanos wasn't earned. But you look at what he did in Ragnarok and everything like that. Him and Thor kind of made amends. Yes, he kind of threw him to the side a little bit. And again, he's always out for himself. But I think he's out for himself, but he still looks out for others. And you kind of look at the Loki TV show, and it was the same thing where he had those.
I feel like he's like, his character is just the reciprocal story arc over and over again. He's the god of mischief, and that's his character. Is he does bad things and makes up for him, because if he's doing these things, he has to keep people on that baited hook. He's a great charismatic leader of people, but he's got to keep people following, but he's trying to take over people. So he does things that make people angry, and then he makes up for it. And there's always that chance that this time, it's like the horrible, stepkid with the alcoholic stepfather. There's always a chance he could be good this time. This year, this is the one he's going to turn that corner. Like,
well, and that's the thing. I think a lot of people had the argument because you have the Loki in the cinematic universe that he went through those trials and tribulations, and he became closer with his brother, realized that his father did love him and everything like that. And then at the hands of Thanos, he died trying to, throw him astray. And then you have the Loki from the TV show, which is a different Loki. And he gets his redemption arc basically just Clockwork Orange to him, where he has to just watch his life, things that happened in that. And some people are like, oh, that Loki doesn't deserve it because he just watched it. But it still kind of clicked and still made you feel for the guy when you're watching the show. Mm-hmm. And, you know, granted, he had to go up against himself. Yeah, that's a whole thing. But
even just a little something like them, the little things that happen that suddenly when he does something that in the show, you're like, okay, this thing that he just did was because he genuinely was trying to help this other person, trying to make something better. 2 minutes later, he's out doing something, trying to get one up on him again. But that specific moment was like, yeah, okay, there was a little kernel of goodness in you there.
Yeah. So I mean, I think if we're gonna go the route of deserving, I think Loki deserved the redemption arc. Now, comics, I'm not going to touch that because I haven't read enough of them, so we're not going to even go that route. We're just the cinematic universe.
MCU Loki, he did enough bad things, and then I think he atoned for them enough, and not just because his character's fun to watch. Just if you break down the character stuff, like if Loki was the bad guy in the first couple movies, by the end of it, he was not a bad guy in your mind anymore.
Right. Let's go with one that's fresh in your mind. Jaime Lannister.
What? Fresh in my mind.
Well, I mean, you know, Game of Thrones ended 3 years ago.
Less than 10 years ago.
Yeah,
that sounds good. It's just a drop in the bucket.
That's fresh for us, man, okay?
So, Jaime Lannister in Game of Thrones, he did definitely become a different character. That was another show where they made you love and hate the same character repeatedly on and off throughout the show.
I was going to say, yeah, because you have also, what's his name?
I mean, you can make a case that Tyrion, the one that got his parts chopped off.
That's what I was trying to think of. I can't think of his name. Oh, hold on.
Greyjoy.
Yeah, Greyjoy.
Theon Greyjoy.
Theon.
But you can make a choice for him. You can make a choice for Sansa Stark. Like almost any of those characters, you could make a choice that they did something for the greater good. But
the greater good. Jaime, though, he was a victim of bad writing because he started off like a horrible person, right? We know that. And then he kind of went that route. He got captured, and he had this whole. He went through the redemption, right? He met up with Brienne, they became friends, and he kind of saw the error of his ways. But that the bad writing took over for the last season, which that's a whole other podcast that we're not going to even get into. Everybody has their opinions on the last season, but they did kind of ruin everything that they built him up because he, you know, knighted Brienne of Tarth. He had this friendship or even quote unquote relationship with her and everything like that, and then the last season they just kind of like threw it all aside for him to basically revert to the person that he was. And now I'm not saying that doesn't happen in real life. You know, obviously some people can do that route if you're like, oh, they change and then they don't. But I don't think he fully deserved his redemption arc. And that's because I think the writers kind of did him dirty on that one.
Well, call me old-fashioned, but it's really tough to go back the not safe for kids scenes with him and his sister. Like, it's tough to come back from that and be like, yeah, this guy. All right. Yeah. Well, all is forgiven, my man. Yeah. No.
Another debated one is Anakin Skywalker / Darth Vader.
Yes.
So if we're talking the original trilogy, New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, he went from this hardcore, you know, Sith Lord, blew up planets, but he was also the Emperor's lackey, and then ended up going against his training, right, and killing the Emperor. Spoiler alert.
What?
A lot of people think that he didn't deserve it. I mean, he went from being this monster who blew up a whole planet just to get some information, find out the rebels and torturing and everything, and then, you know.
See, I would fall on because maybe I'm just negative about all these redemption arcs, but I would fall on the side of the Vader argument in that, yes, at the last very moment he didn't follow through and helped kill the Emperor and stop that from going on, but that's the least he could have done at that point. The Empire still grew over how many centuries of him taking over and how many planets he destroyed, how many civilizations he completely overturned. But, I don't know if we can go quite that far. We can't have the Emperor kill my son and kill it. Okay, well, we'll just stop right here. And I wish I was a good dad, right?
So you're saying he didn't deserve it?
I don't think he did. He had another one where he had, like, when you go through the Vader story, especially with the people that go into the books and the lore of all Star Wars, there's a lot more character build-up that led him down the path of the dark side where he thought he was doing the right thing, which
right.
I'll be okay with that. But in the scope of the movies of 4, 5, 6, I don't think he deserved the redemption arc. I feel like that redemption arc was more just to give Luke some closure on his daddy issues.
Fair. Actually, that's pretty fair. I mean, they did go a little bit deeper in, like you said, what kind of turned him that way. But if you put all of them together, maybe, I don't know. He's one that, you know, like you said, you could argue both ways, but I think more it's like, no.
Okay, because we'll just do the math on there if we want to, break it down to ones and zeros here. Does stopping the Emperor, but not really stopping him, make up for the scene with the younglings?
I was going to bring up execute Order 66. I was going to bring that up and go, he did. I
mean, that's a cliff that, like, the redemption arc, you just hope he hit a rock at the bottom like that, and it's over quick. Like, that's the best redemption you can hope for after that point,
right? Again, that's the kind of thing. It's like you look at the whole story and you're like, well, he did murder a whole bunch of younglings, so...
and murdered a room full of toddlers with a laser sword. Man.
Okay, I'm going to throw him in the pile of nah.
Now on the Star Wars side, what about the Kylo Ren redemption from the
I don't... That one to me just seemed more of the full-on just issues of who he was. Like, I feel like, again, he was a character... He was a victim of bad writing because we didn't get a full-on explanation, of his turn to the dark side. It's because, Luke didn't want to train him. He said something and then it's like, oh, and you're like,
I'll agree with you on that completely, because in the movies of getting his character put together, you never know why. He just appears like this skulky teenager who has to do what Grandpappy says. Mm-hmm. But you look at what he is like. He's like ruling the entire empire right now. He had to have been doing something along the way, not just, yes, I'll just do that. Okay, whatever you say. Yes, let's do it. Like,
right?
There was no rhyme or reason. He was just there, and he was just confused. Like, why are you telling me to do this? Ooh, there's a pretty girl. She says to do something else. I'm conflicted. Uh-oh. I remember those feelings.
Yeah, here comes my dad. Hi, Dad. I love you. No, I don't. Goodbye. I mean, it was the whole thing too of like when he killed Snoke. It was like it didn't feel deserved. It felt kind of like the whole Vader thing of like that's the least he could do at that time. Mm-hmm. Like and again, like I know that there's more backstory into it, and you could get further in, but like the movies themselves just kind of gave us this broody guy who had a lot of power and couldn't control it, and I don't know. I feel like he didn't deserve it, and I have my issues with those movies as it is. But those ones itself, I just feel like they kind of like.
You don't walk away. I don't walk away from the latest Star Wars movies thinking, you know what, Kylo Ren, he ended up being a real hero, like
right. Right. They kind of, I don't know. They tried to make him Han Solo-y with the attitude, and then coming back and going, "I did care about you," and it's just, I don't know.
Now, one of the arcs that I think we can both agree on that is possibly one of the best redemption arcs in fiction history comes from Avatar: The Last Airbender. Mm-hmm. And Zuko and his storyline along those 3 books of Avatar: The Last Airbender is
phenomenal.
Yeah.
I mean, and here's Here's the thing: you say books, but we all, if you're not familiar with the show, it's just seasons. But they have them separated into books. And Zuko is one of those ones where you're watching it. Book 1, you're like, I hate this guy. Like, this guy's what a jerk. Book 2, you're like, this guy's a jerk, but do I kind of like feel sorry for him? And then book 3 comes around, and you're like, this guy's all right. Mm-hmm. And it's not like he did anything too inherently bad. What he was doing was, we're seeing a theme here of daddy issues. He was trying to get his honor back, and he had problems with his father and everything like that. And
grew up with a dad telling him that he had to be the ruler, the biggest, best ruler was, but he was never going to be good enough.
And had to deal with his sister telling him that he's never good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of those ones where he stopped drinking the Fire Nation tea and, opened up his eyes to, basically the world around him. And was like, okay, I don't have to do what I'm told. And that's kind of like, I think what they tried to do with Kylo was they tried to kind of take those elements, but it just didn't work.
And I feel like the Airburner was nice too, because they had the epic long storyline they could work into it. Yeah. And they had something worked in with Zuko of having his uncle. So through this whole growth, there was his uncle who, from the start, didn't like the way Zuko's dad treated him. And then got to repeatedly be there for Zuko every time there was something bad that happened, to advise him or help push him on the way. So it was very believable in how this character changed, because like, if I hung out with Uncle Iroh every day for 4 or 5 years, you better believe I would be like a living fortune cookie.
You'd be a saint. Well, and that's the thing too, is like you look at Iroh, and he, the show does great backstory with all these characters, and Iroh was a great general. And he fought in the war, which you can assume that he probably murdered tons of people.
Don't you remember Sexy Iroh?
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. But like, here's the thing: is like he even kind of had his mini redemption of like, he had an awakening where he's like, this isn't right, and he just kind of stepped aside, and everybody's like, oh, you're the great dragon, blah blah. He's like, nah, not anymore. And that it kind of like, the way he mentored Zuko just really worked.
And to have the beginning of the story of this torpy little angry kid that you just despised, that was trying to kill the Avatar and make the Fire Nation take over the rest of the world. And by the end of it, he's still then trying to become leader of the Fire Nation, but to help them help the rest of the world become one society functioning together. Like, just how the goals shift and what he's trying to go after. All of a sudden, you're like, okay, this kid Zuko.
Well, it's funny too. I was gonna say, it's funny too. You're watching the show, and it's a Nickelodeon show, and you're like, oh, this is goofy. And then like, after some episodes, you're like, that hit really hard. Why do my emotions feel like this?
I did that a few times. A few times. Even that show, I'm not gonna admit, there was times watching through, and there'd be like tears rolling up the side of your eye. You're like, I'm watching a Nickelodeon cartoon. I don't. It must be allergy season.
Oh man, the tales of Ba Sing Se get you every time. I asked my wife about this one, because this is one where she's a Harry Potter fan, and I asked her, and she thought about it. Snape, and that's why I asked you too, because you were like, well, I mean, obviously, there's the whole, they look at the thing of like where he put himself in front of the kids in danger, right? He got in between them. But you also look at his past of like, he was whiny and longed after a woman that had no interest in him, really. And he resented the kid because of that. And I mean, yeah, he did end up kind of doing the right thing, but he was also part of a very bad thing that helped bring Voldemort back. So, I mean, we love the actor, but let's put the actor aside and actually look at the character here. And
I feel like he wasn't much of a redemption arc. I feel like I lean towards what you just said. If he was one of the most static characters in that series. It appeared like he went all these ghosts because we learned things about Snape, but the way his character behaved to me was, if you go to the first book and the last book, still the exact same expectations what that character would or wouldn't do.
Right.
Like, he was super loyal, almost to a fault, and he didn't want to deviate from any plans, and just got weaved into one too many webs at a time. Because he wasn't evil necessarily,
right?
But he wasn't good, and he was doing things for good people, but he was also doing good things for bad people. And
See,
it was just like trying to play the middleman line too far, which isn't a redemptive sign to me. Like,
no, and what's funny is I remember when the books came out and when the movies came out, I hadn't read them, I hadn't watched them, but I knew a whole bunch of people who were into them, and they were sitting there talking about Snape and everything like that. And when the big thing happened with Snape and Dumbledore, I'm like, when I started watching the movies, I was like, is he a good guy or a bad guy? I was very confused because a lot of people hated him, but they're like, no, he's good, because like they had read the books, right? So they knew his character development and everything like that. And I'm sure his character development was probably more developed in the books than it was on the movies, but it's one of those ones where I'm watching, I'm like, people like this guy?
Well, it's like you said, it's the motivation behind it's weird, because if you're a kid watching the movies for the first time, you go through, you're like, oh yeah, this guy's a jerk, he hates Harry Potter, and then it gets a little further, this guy was a Death Eater, he's helping Voldemort wants Harry Potter, and he's helping him, that guy's a jerk, and you find out then like, oh, he's just being a jerk because he wanted Harry's mom, and now he's mad at the kid. Like, what?
Yeah.
This is far less dare I say believable, but
that's like me getting a D in history class because my teacher was a student teacher when my mom was in school, and he didn't like her, so he knew who I was and gave me a D to get back at her. I'm like, why? I wasn't even around, dude.
Yeah. Vodka, what the F?
And that did happen. True story. Let's go the Stranger Things route. We got two in there that could kind of go the redemption arc. You brought up Steve.
Yeah, I'm going to fire off Steve. I think Steve's a great redemption arc because very similar to what you described with Zuko. You watch the first season of Stranger Things, and Steve is this big-haired, pompous, popular, douchey kid that is mean to everybody, makes fun of everybody, spreads all kinds of lies about what's her name with the girl. I can't remember her name right now.
I got you.
And
the one that he ends up dating.
Yeah, every time they're on screen, the first season, you just want to punch this kid in the face. He's just awful. And then you go through a season, there's bad things happen. He starts helping out. He does some good things. He gets there to do it. And by the end of it, he's now like the leader of this ragtag gang of teenagers fighting against the underworld, saving the world. And he's the comic relief and the muscle for these kids, and picking them up and taking them to the mall so they can fight demogorgons. And he's lovable by the end of the third season.
He's a victim of great writing, just like Zuko is. They took this person who, like you said, the first season you watch him, you're like, this guy's a tool. Second season he comes back and he's like, I mean, even the end of the first season, he kind of starts that redemption thing of like being the babysitter with the bat, right? And then going into the season 2, you're like, this guy's all right. Season 3, you're like, let's get this guy his own show. Like, yeah. And in season 3, you also have Billy, who is, I forgot her name's brother. Max. Yeah. He takes over the tool belt there, and towards the end he kind of clicks and redeems himself. That one I don't think is nearly as justified as Steve, but it did kind of get you feeling, because like you
his also gets washed too, because he was a jerk to Max and other kids at school. But then you see the backstory of he had a horrible family life, so you can see kind of why he was lashing out. But then when he's, spoilers, possessed by the Demogorgon, he does lots of horrible things. And then when he kind of breaks out of that, and then you start to feel like, oh yeah, I know you were kind of a jerk, but you didn't deserve to be like possessed by a demon and ripped apart, kind of a jerk.
Right.
Maybe like few weeks in juvie and slap on the wrist or something. But
Oh man. Again, like his was not necessarily like, oh yeah, he redeemed himself. His was oh man, you got a bad ticket. you didn't deserve that. But because he didn't really do anything to redeem himself. It was just kind of like he clicked and was like, okay, and then he didn't get enough chance to. I don't know. I'm sure some people out there are like, no, he redeemed himself.
Yeah. I did come across one that I saw on a lot of different forums because I was looking at a bunch of ranking lists and stuff like that of redemption arcs. Yeah. One that I saw that came up multiple times that I feel like needs to have a pin put it to be not a pin put it but just stopped is Gru from Despicable Me. Because they go through and they talk about how he was this evil overlord henchman, and then by the end of the movies he's this lovable kind of thing. But he's still trying to take over the world and steal things on a constant basis. Like he's just
doing very poorly at it.
He's just mildly nicer to the minions and takes care of 3 little girls now. Like that doesn't make you a hero. I mean, it doesn't hurt, but just means
that's weird.
You're
I didn't even
a supervillain with a heart. But if you go for just his interactions with the minions and the girls and those movies, stuff like that, he does go from being curmudgeon-y old, I hate everything, I'm going to slap you around and do what I say, to changing perspectives and trying to help them and make sure that they're cared for and things like that too. So there's an element of it, but still a supervillain.
That's kind of how I feel like Spike from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Mm-hmm. We're going to go way back on that one, but he's on a few lists too for redemption arcs, and it's like, I think he had good writers behind him and fans loved him, but he was the main villain for the first couple of seasons, if I remember. Mm-hmm. And he did some bad stuff to Buffy, and then all of a sudden it's like, I'm good now, blah blah blah, and you're like,
anyone with hair that bleached can't be good.
It was the 90s, man.
I know. Yeah, I mean, he did completely sacrifice himself to save everything, which that's a little above and beyond himself. So I would count that as a.
You think?
I didn't watch enough. I don't think I've ever even finished the whole thing. I was not into it when it came out long ago, and I tried watching it recently, and it was okay, but I never got into it to really,
Should have had you ask your wife real quick if he deserved the redemption.
I can go find out. Hold on, I'll be right back.
Oh, this is unprecedented. This has never happened before on a Get Geekish podcast. If you're just listening to this and not watching, Bino just got up out of his chair, opened up the door, walked into the living room where I'm assuming he's going, "Hey, honey, did Spike deserve the redemption arc in Buffy the Vampire Slayer?" And she's probably thinking to herself, oh, he's back. That was quick.
All right, it's confirmed. She said yeah.
Oh, okay. And she's a huge Buffy fan, so I mean...
She said, it's been a long, long time ago, I don't remember exactly, but I really liked him, and he was good. When I finished up, I felt good at what he did, so...
Oh, man.
I'm a little afraid of what you talked about while I was gone, but...
No, I was just giving a play-by-play of what happened, just for the viewers that weren't watching.
Yes.
Or for the listeners who weren't watching. There we go. The viewers that were watching. Oh, my gosh.
What about Mr. Tony Stark and Iron Man?
Still a tool, but yes. Yes.
He did certainly change his mantra and,
Well, he had quite a few different redemption points, and you can't, as much as people don't like Iron Man 3, you can't help but feel a little bad for him with the whole PTSD of what he experienced and everything like that. So, yeah, still kind of a tool, but yeah.
Yeah, that's what it was. I mean, that was his character, that was Stan Lee, the created Iron Man, basically, like, I want to make the most unlikable character likable. So he took an ultra-rich, arrogant playboy with more money to do with and turned him into a superhero. And that's where we get Tony Stark from.
I'm sure. I mean, if we had an extra probably 45 minutes, we could go down a lot of different comic book villains themselves that have had redemption arcs, if you will. They've had, I mean, because almost every villain I can think of has had some kind of like, kind of in different universes too. So, but
and it comes then you start threading the needle of like, well, is this a redemption arc or is this just a backstory with enough character build up to actually understand why they're doing a horrible thing? Or understand why the horrible things they're doing in their minds would be seen as not horrible.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of hit that with that Billy from Stranger Things too. So, and there's a few on there, but I mean, we we babbled for a bit.
It's time to redeem ourselves.
And we even had a get geekish first of you getting up and getting live information right then and there.
Beep, 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 beep.
This just in. That was unplanned.
But yeah, what do you think is your favorite redemption arc of anything you've ever watched or read? Let us know at Get Geekish and see if we can come up list some other ones. Maybe a few that we missed, or ones that I've never seen, or ones we just forgot about. Like,
I was gonna say we missed kind of two mediums of books and video games where there's tons of redemption arcs in those too. But
well, we would do like a half-hour podcast. So
yeah, I was gonna say we don't got ain't nobody got time for that. But we do appreciate you listening to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks. We appreciate it very much. Whether you watch it on YouTube, whether you watch it listen to it on any of the podcast channels, we appreciate it. GetGeekish.com is the website. Of course, you can find us on social media. Derek over there, I'm Bino. Thank you again for joining us, and we will talk at you next week.
Bye.
Hey, thanks for listening. We truly appreciate it. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast. Find us on social media at Get Geekish. And if you want more podcasts, we got plenty of them.